In this section, we will learn the concept of hypothesis testing. What is actually hypothesis testing? That's things we will learn in these sections. And what is non-hypothesis and what is p-value? That's things are actually we will learn. But in next lecture, we will see how to find, how to calculate these things, and how to compare these things with real data. But in this text, just bear with me. Just in this sector, be patient. Just in this lecture, we just discussed what is actually hypothesis testing. What is? Suppose let's take just discuss this thing through an examples. Okay, suppose let's take we have a two set of data. The first set is for class 1, first set is for class 1, and the second set is for class 2. Means the data that we have collected for class 1 and 2, the height of the student for two different classes. Heights of the students of two different classes. Suppose let's take for class 1 the high we have collected the such kind of 50 observations, means we have collected the heights of the 50 students, 50 random students from class 1, and same things we have collected the 50 random students from the class 2. That's the job we have. And suppose let's take these examples we have taken here. So we have collected 50 such student 1 2 3 up to 50, and similarly we have collected 50. Okay, these are the two different classes, and from each classes we have collected randomly selected 50 students, and we have calculated their height. Suppose let's take its height is 160. Suppose let's take its is 158. Suppose let's take 155. Let's take its is 140. Like height we collected. Suppose for class 2, suppose similarly for class 2, let's take its height it 159, 167, 165. So let's take 134. Suppose let's take this kind of height we have calculated to two different classes. Now the questions is that's arise into our mind. So is there a differences? Suppose let's take the questions that arises in our mind. Is there a difference in the height of the student? Is there a difference? Is there a difference in the heights of the students? In class 1 and class 2? That's the task that we are want to get its answer. Class 1 and class 2. So is there any difference between these two class students? That's the answer do you want to get. Okay, suppose let's take from these observations we have collected. Suppose let's take its mean value is for class 1 mu 1, let's take, and the mean value for the class 2 is, let's take, mu 2. Now we have the observations. We can easily from the previous lectures we already known that if we got the observations, then we can easily find its distribution. So suppose let's take the distributions of the class 1 is like that, and the distribution for the class 2, suppose let's take its distribution is like that, like such kind of distribution for class 2. So for class 2 the mean will lie on somewhere here, Suppose let's take its mean is mu2 here, and for class 1, suppose let's take its mean is somewhere here 1. So this white curve is the for class 1, and the pink curve is for class 2, okay. And this is the simple axis, this is the random variable height. Now from these distributions, you can see that the mean value of the class 2 is greater than the mean value of the class 1. The mean value of the class 2 is greater than mean value of the class 1. You can see. So we can conclude that if the means are the different and the mean 2 is greater than the mean 1, then we can conclude that the class students heights are larger than the class 1 height. But the questions arise that suppose sir, if there are a outlier type of students in the class 2, that conclusion may be wrong. Okay, yes, obviously these things may be wrong, but how we can conclude in such situations? So for such situations, how can we conclude that these the heights of the two different classes are different or not? So to get such kind of answer, the hypothesis testing, the concept of hypothesis testing comes into the picture. Now I think you got the answer in which situation the hypothesis testing come into the picture. You got some idea, some little bit idea. Now let's discuss step by step what is actual the hypothesis testing. Let's try to discuss. So in the first step for the hypothesis testing, in the first step that we have to do, that first we have to choose a test statistic. For this hypothesis testing, first thing that we have to do, we have to choose a test statistic. Test statistic means what? Means test statistics means what is our actual job that we have to find the difference of the height, in the height of the students in the class 1 and 2. Means difference of the height means our test statistics will be difference of the mean value of the class 1 and class 2. Difference of this mean from the class 2 and class 1. That's the thing that we are interested to find its differences. This thing simple, it will be the test statistics, where mu2, it is the simple mean of the mean height. These things is simple the mean height of class 2 student, and mu1 is simply the, if you are interested, you can consider mu1 minus mu2. It's not matter. According to your test statistic, our next algorithm will be designed. So as you like. So suppose in this case, let's take, we have considered mu2 minus mu1. So where mu2 is the simple mean height of the class 2 student, and mu1 is simple the mean height of the class 1 student. Mean height of the class 1 student. That's the first. Means first we have to decide what is actually our test statistic. Okay, that's the thing that first we have to do. Now, in second step we have to consider the null hypothesis. Okay, now let's try to understand what is null hypothesis and what is alternative hypothesis. So in the second step that we have to do, we have to find the null hypothesis. Null hypothesis means in general null hypotheses are denoted by H naught. In general, null hypothesis means the differences are there, have no difference. Means the hypothesis that we have built here, means the two the that we are on means what is actually hypothesis means what we have to compare something two different classes. It should be classes, it depends two different things. Means the null thing means there have no, if there have no any differences. Okay, so that things are actually called the null hypothesis. So null hypothesis, it is simple the if no differences means there have no differences. If there have no differences, that things are called actually the null hypothesis. So the null hypothesis means no differences, no differences in the mu1 and mu2. Mu1, that's the hypothesis we have designed. Okay, this is the sample called the null hypothesis. And the another hypothesis that's called the alternative hypothesis. All means the opposite of this hypothesis, means there have no differences, and alternative will be there have differences. That's thing called the alternative hypothesis. It's thing called H1. Okay, so the alternative hypothesis H1 will be the alternative hypothesis H1 now will be difference in these two mean mu1 means mu1 and mu2 means if there have any differences. That first hypothesis that we have drawn here means there have no differences, and the alternative hypothesis means opposite of it means there have some differences. Now let's try to apply these two hypotheses in our calculation. That is the first thing that we have to we will prove these things by the sample prove by contradiction. Now let's see how these things we will actually use. Now let's try to see. After that we have to calculate it with the p value of it. After that we have to calculate it the p value. Now let's try to understand what is p value actually. In the next lecture, in the next video, we will see how to calculate the p value using these two hypotheses and with the help of this mean. These things how these things are actually calculated, we will see this thing in next video. Now let's try to understand what is the p value. Okay, so the p value is simply the probability of, it is simply probability of observations mu2 minus mu1 means that's the actual test statistics that we have drawn here. Means we are interested to find the differences of that observations. Means probability of observations mu2 minus mu1 if the condition is if the null hypothesis is true. If the null hypothesis is true. Is the first these things, the value of this probability is actually called the p value. Okay, now let's try to understand more deeply. So what is our null hypothesis? Null hypothesis means there have no differences in these two classes. That's the null hypothesis. So, and the null hypothesis, in this hypothesis, we have assumed that this hypothesis means there have no differences in these two classes. That's the first hypothesis. Assume that this is the first condition we have assumed, and on that basis of this assume we will find the probability of these differences. Okay, so first means what is these things. So the hypothesis testing and that in the area of probability actually used by simple the using the proof of contradictions. I think from your 12th standard you will study the induction, mathematical induction, I will think you will study these things. So that the same kind of things also applicable here. Means there have here we will prove these things by simple proof by contradiction. We will prove these things by simple using the proof by contradiction. Okay, so the first thing that we have to do, we have to assume something. Okay, first in generally we have assumed that our null hypothesis, means we have assumed that there have no any differences, and on the basis of that assumptions we will calculate the probability value of our test hypothesis. Means these are the test hypothesis. If this probability value is high, then we consider this our null, it means our null hypothesis is there have no difference. If this probability value is low, then we can reject this. If we reject this, the alternatively we have accept the H1. I think you got the answer. Okay, so let's try to discuss in more detail. So first thing that that this is our assumption. These things are called our assumption part. This is our assumption part. First we have assumed our is not is true. First we have assumed these things. Our null hypothesis is true. Our there means there have no differences. First we have assumed this. Now on this basis of this assumption, now we calculated the p-value. Now p-value means probability of our test statistics. Means now if we have calculated the p-value, suppose let's take the p-value. Now the p-value, suppose let's take we got this p-value 0.9. Next video we will see how to calculate this p-value. Now suppose let's take the p-value is 0.9. Okay, now if this is 0.9, then we can conclude that this means what? This means the probability of suppose let's take the mean value. We have the observations. Suppose let's take the mean value, the differences of the mean value. From these observations we can easily calculate these two value, mu1 and mu2. Suppose let's take we got the differences from these two things, mu2 minus. So let's take we got these differences 10 centimeter. We got this thing. Okay, so this means the probability of the state statistics means 10 centimeter, differences is 10 centimeter, is 0.9 if our null hypothesis, means if there have no differences, is true. If this is true, means if this value, if here it is sufficient amount of high value, this value is sufficient amount of high value, if this value is high, in such cases we accept the null hypothesis. Here we accept the null hypothesis. Otherwise, if suppose let's take we got such kind of, if suppose let's take we got the p-value is equals to 0. Suppose let's take we got 5%, 0.05. We got this value, p-value this. Okay, this means what? This means what? This means the probability of the differences is 10 centimeter. Its probability is that differences is 10 centimeter. Its probability is 0.5, means 5%, or 0.05, or we call 5%. Okay, if A is not is true, or here you can call here 90%. Probability is 90%. Chances means in probability, if you use the probability word, then you can use this kind of word. Otherwise you can use chances. Here is also same, chances. Okay, chances. Means here we can conclude that and what kind of result? In such cases the probability value is 0 means very low value. So in such cases we reject this hypothesis, null hypothesis, because our assumption that we assume here null hypothesis is true. On the basis of these assumptions we got the very low probability, and because of that we reject the null hypothesis and we accept our alternative hypothesis. Each one means there have some differences. Okay, means we reject this thing, we will accept this thing, we will accept this thing, we will accept this thing. I think you got some idea. Okay, this is the first clarify your idea. What is the actual internal meaning of the hypothesis testing? And if you understood it, then on next video we can easily understand how to find this p-value. Okay, so the first thing that we have to, the first job that we have to do, we have to design the test statistic according to our problem. So first thing, we have to understand intuitively the problem, and on the basis of the observed value we have to calculate it, we have to build our test statistics. And after building the test statistics we have to design the two hypotheses, means null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. In null hypothesis there have no any differences of these test statistics. Okay, means of the two comparable thing that we have, there have no any differences. And in alternative hypothesis just opposite, means there have some differences. Now on the basis of, now we have assumed something, on the basis of the assumptions we have calculated the p-value. The p-value is what? P-value is the probability of our test statistics, probability of our test statistic. This is simple, the test statistic. This is the simple test statistic, probability of the test statistic on the basis of our assumption. Okay, now if our assumptions, if suppose let's take our assumptions, if on the basis of our assumptions we calculate the p-value, and if this p-value is high, if this p-value means if this probability value is high, this means what? This means if the null hypothesis, if there have no any differences, then on the basis of that, on the basis of these assumptions, if we assume that if there have no differences, now on the basis of these assumptions we got this probability value is very high. Now let's conclude that our assumption is correct, means on that scenario we accept our null hypothesis. In other way, if p-value is low, means what? On the basis of our assumption, means on the basis that there have no differences, if the probability is very low, the probability is very low, probability is very low, means what? Our assumptions is incorrect. On such cases we will reject our null hypothesis and we'll accept the next alternative hypothesis. Okay, that's the thing that we have to do in the sections of the hypothesis testing. I think you got the idea how the thing actually internally works. Now we will, next video we will see how to calculate this p-value.